Right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Are we all set on Zoom, Alan?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So I'm going to talk to you about a relatively unexplored area of Ralph Thoresby's life, his rapeseed oil business at Sheepscar, near Sheepscar Bridge, which he undertook in partnership with his Kirgate neighbour, Samuel Ibbotson, on land rented from Thoresby's father-in-law, Richard Sykes. Now, Ibbotson lived across the road from Thoresby on Kirgate. You can see on the plan, number 13 was Thoresby's house, and Ibbotson's house, number 8, just on the corner of Vicar Lane. Can you not see the numbers? Oh, there we go. So that's 13, that's Thoresby, and then 8 is Ibbotson. Yeah, so they were close neighbours. Now, the idea for this as a small research project arose after the discovery of a very old 3-page handwritten copy of a court statement that Thoresby made in support of his proceedings to recover money from Ibbotson's estate after he died unexpectedly in September 1697. Thoresby claimed that Ibbotson failed to contribute his fair share of the capital required to run the business, leaving him £1,000 out of pocket, which was a lot of money in those days. Now, this statement forms part of the collection of Thoresby's papers held by the grammar school, which Peter Meredith mentioned last week as having been rescued by the 18th century historian Thomas Wilson. And it's useful for the insight that it gives us into Thoresby's character and the partnership relations and how the business operated. So it's interesting to just speculate where the mill was at Sheepscar. That's one of the pages from the court statement. Really difficult to interpret. And again, I'm thankful to Peter Meredith for translating that. But where was this business and the bridge? Thoresby refers to an early mill at Sheepscar that was producing rapeseed oil in around 1635, which he thought was the first known rapeseed oil mill in Leeds. And there's evidence that this property belonged to the Sykes family, because in the West Yorkshire Archives, there's actually a copy of a deed referring to land at Sheepscar Bridge, upon which there was a water mill belonging to William Sykes, who may well have been the same William Sykes who was Richard Sykes's own father. Thoresby noted that the mill later became a corn mill and then a paper mill before reverting to rapeseed oil production. But by 1689, it had fallen into disuse because Thoresby noted the partnership would operate from a place where there had been a mill formerly. So let's try and give a bit of perspective on the geography. And I think it's helpful to try and locate where Sheepscar Bridge and the oil mill might have been. Over the years, much of Sheepscar Beck has been covered over. And of course, the bridge which crossed it is now long gone. Now, I think that the bridge was probably somewhere to the right of the bank building at the top end of North Street. And I think somewhere down there. And I just wonder whether, if you see that blue shop sign or whatever it is, business sign, I just wonder if the beck ran under or runs underneath the road there and under that archway, which may explain why there is an archway there and it wasn't built on, but certainly it was somewhere around there.
Is that Roseville Road?
No.
That's top of North Street, isn't it? You've got the old sorry.
This white building is still.
You've got the old library there, which was the archives, isn't it? So that's the start of the Roundy Road, just there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've got the sort of, I think there's a hand car wash over here. Used to be a diner, didn't it? So, and my theory on the location of the mill is that it was south of the bridge. Now you can see on the plan on the left, I've put an arrow where the bridge was. You can see the beck running down south there to a mill pond. There's an oil mill lane there. And on the right-hand plan, you can see a big mill pond, and below it, an oil and mustard mill. Now, these are 19th century plans, and the plan on the right is later than the one on the left. You can see on the right-hand plan, you can see Whitelock Street, bottom left, which is still there. And we'll have a look at that in a moment. So we know that Thoresby's mill was served by a mill pond and a weir. When that complex was actually sold in 1832, in addition to the oil mill, it was advertised as including 10 acres of excellent grassland. So it was a sizable area. And in his will, Thoresby's father-in-law, Richard Sykes, helpfully describes the property that Thoresby and Ibbotson occupied. And again, it sounds like a sizable area. I'll just read it. All those tenements, mills, both watermill and horse mill. So you can see there were two mills there. They put a horse mill up there later, which we'll come to, with all the buildings and appurtenances with the same, and two closes and a croft, and all ways and advantages to the same, belonging near Sheepscar Bridge in the manor of Leeds, and now in the occupation of Samuel Ibbotson and the said Ralph Thoresby. Now I think that sounds like, you know, two closes, a croft. Is that a couple of fields, a croft? Not sure what that would have been. Would there have been a bit of residential use, or not sure? But it's helpful to have that description. I think it implies two fields, perhaps with boundaries, and a croft, perhaps with some accommodation and a bit of agricultural use. And I think that Ibbotson used this land for other purposes whilst the partnership was operating, perhaps for some arable farming, because Thoresby recounts that during the litigation, Ibbotson's son James tried to get some money out of Thoresby, claiming that his father had incurred unaccounted for disbursements for ploughing and brick making. So perhaps Ibbotson was undertaking that activity on this land. I think he must have been. Thoresby said it was nothing to do with the partnership because they hadn't benefited by the ventures. And I also think that the location of the mill pond is significant because you can see at this point here, you've got Gipton Beck joining this is actually looking north. You've got the old bank building there. The Beck's being culverted. Gipton Beck joining it there. It's hard to envisage much water power coming out of this now, but there must have been back in the day, certainly enough to form a mill pond. And I think if you were going to put a mill pond in somewhere to power a mill, you'd look to the best water supply, best point where you're going to get the most water. So I would have thought that would be south of this point where Gipton Beck joins it, because it's bringing in more water, creating a more powerful flow. And another factor that makes me think it was south of the bridge was the fact that we know Thoresby and Ibbotson visited the mill. They walked there on 3rd September 1694, and Thoresby commented that they viewed the town. Now, I think perhaps you're more likely to have been able to view the town from a spot down here on this sort of site than you are if you were standing outside the old E.B. Bamforth building, for example, the leather manufacturers on the north side of the bridge. I don't think you'd see much of town if you were standing outside that building, because you'd have the hill of modern day Clay Pit Lane in front of you. So I think it, just my theory is it's all pointing to the mill being somewhere down here where the 19th century oil and mustard mill was. The view on the right is looking south towards Whitelock Street, where we've got some flats. There's Whitelock Street today, and the flats on the right, and then the Sheepscar Beck running behind those flats. But let's look at the business side of things. The partnership between Thoresby and Ibbotson was intending to start in 1689, but then something happened. As Thoresby put it, the wonderful revolution, when the Catholic King James II was deposed and replaced with William of Orange and his wife Mary, who were jointly crowned King and Queen. Thoresby noted enthusiastically in his review that at Leeds this event was met with such a general satisfaction and joy as seldom has been known. So in this heady atmosphere, did Ibbotson foresee a likely period of economic and political stability that encouraged him to invite Thoresby to join him in a new business? He may also have been encouraged by the restoration of the town's more liberal charter, originally granted by Charles II, which gave people the right to work where they chose. For the new partners, the business offered the prospect of making money. This 1695 publication, translated as the Safety of England, noted the enthusiasm for growing rapeseed in the north of England, which it claimed to be highly profitable, more considerable than those of any corn or grain, and a form of agriculture that had benefited from Dutch influence in improving the quality of the land, thus enabling vast quantities of rapeseed and also linseed to be grown and processed into oil, so that by the end of the century, the oil business was deemed of sufficient importance to be protected by substantial tariffs imposed upon imported oil, which sounds a bit like some modern politics and policies today, doesn't it? And of course, it wasn't just the partners who hoped to benefit from this operation. At the same time, Father Sykes gained a welcome new commercial rent on a section of his estate that was destined for Thoresby's own wife in his will. So if you are running a business like this, you need a reliable supply of rapeseed, reliable customers who are going to buy the oil in sufficient quantities to make it worthwhile. So we'll just examine this. And also before we do, what was the end use for rapeseed oil at this time? It had been manufactured in the north of England going back many centuries, with the earliest record being at Selby in 1373 and Gainsborough 4 years earlier. Well, it had various uses. It could be lit and burnt in lamps. Got a couple of 17th century oil lamps there. And it could be used for lubricating machinery. And it later came to be used in the manufacture of soap, cooking, and it produced a useful byproduct used as fuel and cattle fodder. And later it was manufactured for the use of clothing. The historian R.G. Wilson noted that the oil manufactured by Thoresby and Ibbotson was sold to dry salters and clothiers for use in the preparatory process of wool yarn manufacture. Now, in this context, a Wiltshire clothier called Benedict Webb was granted a 14-year patent by James I in 1624 to manufacture an improved type of rapeseed oil, which he'd found overseas. And he thought it far better than the rapeseed oil being imported from the Low Countries. Later on, in 1715, Thoresby noted that some people put rapeseed oil on their food, perhaps implying that he didn't, as it was for those with strong stomachs, and it was less palatable than olive oil. So to make the oil, you needed a reliable supply of rapeseed, which was supplied by a number of different landowners and also farmers, who included this gentleman, Sir John Gascoigne of Parlington Hall, which was 10 miles east of Leeds. And further afield, Ibbotson's own brother-in-law, who was John Hatfield of Hatfield in Derbyshire, was another supplier. And Thoresby mentions making many journeys to buy rapeseed, including some closer to home from a source near Roundhay, where he mentions walking daily, at one stage in excessive heat. In terms of a market for the oil, Thoresby's brother Jeremiah and Ibbotson's brother-in-law, who was a dry salter, Thomas Fenton of Hunslet, dealt in rapeseed oil, and it was anticipated that they would buy the finished product. Thoresby's brother Jeremiah, he had shops at Armley and Leeds. Fenton was a member of the Salters Guild, and he apparently bought most of the oil. He was also able to advise about rapeseed oil generally. So it seemed there was little doubt that they would be successful and able to make lots of money. Unfortunately, they got off to a bad start. War broke out with France later on in 1689, and this seems to have delayed the start of the partnership until 1691. Thoresby and Ibbotson seem to have been keen to learn from the experience of similar businesses, and going out on reconnaissance was important for them. There's evidence of several visits made by Thoresby and Ibbotson to inspect other local rapeseed oil mills. One such visit occurred in April 1691, where the partners rode to Thorpe Arch to view a new water-powered rapeseed mill parts of which still survive. And they were found to be well preserved when inspected by the West Yorkshire Archaeology Service in 1989. Now, I look at this and I just wonder whether, did Thoresby's rapeseed oil mill look something like this? I mean, it's fascinating to think that he went there. I mean, it doesn't look, I haven't been to look at this, but I think it's been expanded and it's now flats. But nevertheless, this building that Thoresby went to is still there. And it's, I think that I find that very interesting. So one of the things that comes out in the court statement is that Thoresby was clearly taken advantage of by Ibbotson. Ibbotson was 8 years Thoresby's senior. Apparently he exuded confidence. He had a right notion of the business. He claimed to be able and qualified to manage the stock and accounts. And in the court statement, Thoresby reveals that Ibbotson encouraged and reassured him that he could teach him business accounts. But this was nonsense because they never had the most basic item, a cash book.
No.
Instead, both partners took minutes of their receipts and payments that they were aware of in their respective pocketbooks. And the cash book which Thoresby bought was never used. It was later discovered at Ibbotson's house completely empty. And from the court statement, we learn that during the formative months of the business, between June and September 1691, the partnership spent £340 on rapeseed. And we discover the start of a major problem here, because Ibbotson only contributed £128, leaving Thoresby to pay the lion's share of £212. And in every subsequent year, Thoresby notes in the statement, the liabilities of the unfortunate partnership reduced him further. We learn from the statement that Ibbotson's intention was not just for Thoresby to become proficient in the keeping of the financial books of the business, but also to do lots of other tasks, oversee delivery of the rapeseed, supervise the staff making the oil. Oh, and then to arrange for the supply and delivery of the manufactured rapeseed oil to the customers of the business. So he clearly earmarked Thoresby for doing a lot of the hard work. And undoubtedly, we know that he did work very hard at Sheepscar, and this is borne out by his diary entries. He noted in his diary for 1st April 1691, was with the workmen at Sheepscar, and that he was scarcely spending half an hour at home all day due to the fatigues of Sheepscar, especially when taking delivery of rapeseed. On the 4th of September 1691, he was up early receiving rape until noon, which suggests a sizable consignment, and then with the workers at Sheepscar for the rest of the day until about 5 p.m. But there was good news, for on the 20th of October 1691, Thoresby noted, he described witnessing the momentous event at the mill when the men first make oil there. But unfortunately, the joy was short-lived, and just over a week later, on the 28th of October, he was at the mill most of the day, fretting at reiterated disappointments, which continued into 1692, with Thoresby noting on 31st March that these occurred daily and sometimes hourly. Well, what these problems were, one can but speculate, although one issue revealed by the court statement was the stock of oil was ever very small, it being removed as soon as fit to be delivered. So they either had insufficient rapeseed to make the oil or insufficient water to power the mill, or perhaps a mixture of both. And it's possible that some suppliers may have suffered with crop problems, limiting the amount of rapeseed that was available. There's an Oxford antiquary, Anthony Wood, who noted a disastrous run of weather in the spring of 1692, with poor crops throughout the middle years of the decade, causing high prices. Although after 1694, more rapeseed seems to have been available. And this came from abroad and was probably down to the consequences of improvements in English defensive policies at sea, with ships arriving in convoy. So the availability of this foreign rapeseed meant cheaper prices. And in September 1694, Thoresby received a letter from his friend Brian Wilson, advising him not to rush into buying rape and to forbear bargain for rape until you hear further, because presumably Brian Dixon knew that there was going to be some cheaper rape available. Now we know that the mill was water powered, and there's evidence that the supply was not always adequate to power the mill. In the review, Thoresby mentions taking steps to improve this by constructing a new dam, which was found to be unavoidably necessary due to loss of water from a breach on adjoining ground. And there may have been other problems with the health of the workforce, because working with rapeseed, working in close proximity to it, wasn't always a good idea. There were some common adverse side effects, such as secretion of tears, blistered hands, which could occur in warmer weather, or if the rapeseed was mixed with mustard seed. We know that from the description of the estate at Sheepscar in Richard Sykes's will, that there was more than one mill. And on the 19th of September 1692, Thoresby describes being at the mill early, supervising and directing the laying of the foundations for a new horse mill. Now, I think that the reason they would have needed a horse mill was because they hadn't got enough power from the water. We know that when the estate at Whitelock Street was sold in 1832, it was advertised with a good head and drop of water in most seasons, but they also had the backup of steam power by then, which of course Thoresby didn't have. So this is presumably why they went for this bit of horsepower. And the partners were not alone in establishing a horse mill. We know that in September 1694, Thoresby visited and was much impressed with the new horse mill for crushing rape at Gainsborough. And reconnaissance, as we know, was important. And January seems to have been a favourite time of the year for the partners to visit similar businesses and suppliers as well. No doubt indicative of a quiet period at the mill. In 1692, they travelled to Knaresborough to visit Mr. Petty's rape and hemp mills. And the following year, they viewed a mill at Poole. And in 1694, they rode to Aberford and dined with Mr. Hickringill, with whom bargaining about rape and blackware for the rest of the day and evening till late. Now, the mention of blackware is it's obviously a form of pottery. Interesting. perhaps is this a reference to were these used for storage vessels for the rapeseed oil? Why else would Thoresby have been interested in talking about blackware pottery? One of the most revealing things about the court statement is the revelation of the chaotic nature of the business and the relationship between the partners. There was no written partnership agreement to properly regulate the business relationship. Foolishly, each was prepared to rely on the honesty of the other, with Thoresby naively trusting in the fidelity and ability of Ibbotson. The reader learns that each partner apparently agreed to contribute capital and receive profits and losses in equal proportions of money. And mistakenly, perhaps, Thoresby believed Ibbotson to be a wealthy and substantial man. But when it came to the crunch, Thoresby was left to contribute more working capital because we learned that he had more liquid assets. In the court statement, it's claimed that Thoresby owned £1,000 worth of capital invested in good bonds, which were presumably more readily convertible into money than Ibbotson's capital, which we are told comprised a visible estate in land and houses. So Ibbotson hadn't got, so it seems, access to as much ready cash as Thoresby had. Now, the statement discloses there were no formal accounts for any of the years the business operated. And shortly before Ibbotson died, the alarm bells were ringing for Thoresby, as in June 1697, he noted, and I'll read that, "I used all the means I could devise to perfect the accounts between us, yet could never prevail to have them proceeded in, after I had once told him that the method we were in was certainly wrong, and so it appeared afterwards, not only to other merchants, but even by the concession of his son, as cunning as he is." Now that's a reference to James Ibbotson, who we're going to hear more of. Well, on 3rd September 1697, matters got much worse. Thoresby describes the news of Ibbotson's death on horseback whilst travelling to Hunslet with John Hatfield as dismal. Rather jumping the gun somewhat, the widow Ibbotson promptly sold her husband's share in the business to her brother-in-law Thomas Fenton, although Thoresby claimed in the statement that as surviving partner, he might legally as well as honestly have received it in part settlement of the debt owing to him. It's interesting that Fenton was confident enough to try his hand here, where Thoresby and Ibbotson hadn't done so well. Was he perhaps inspired by the end of the war, the previous September? Could well have been. But in February the following year, Thoresby and Fenton were on the road travelling to Lancashire looking for business, stopping at Rochdale and Manchester, but unfortunately none was to be found. And as far as the old partnership was concerned, final accounts were required to get a clear picture of the situation. Now, initially, the court statement recites cooperation between Thoresby and Ibbotson, Ibbotson's estate, and both partners' pocketbooks were willingly referred to two honest and worthy gentlemen in the neighbourhood, from which one of them, a Mr. H.P., was able to prepare as best he could the debit and credit entries, and accounts were drawn up to December 1696. But unfortunately, they couldn't be agreed. And as it became clear that Ibbotson owed Thoresby money, James Ibbotson sought to muddy the waters. he launched a bogus counterclaim for £500. This is where the claim for money for the ploughing and the brickmaking comes in, which Thoresby described as completely false and a sham. Thoresby requested that any monies owing to creditors be jointly met by himself and the widow Ibbotson, only for the latter to reject the request with indignation, Thoresby says, claiming to one of the creditors that she had paid as far as she had the ability. Thoresby says that he thought that this was a sad reward for his kindness in advancing monies, and he was even tempted to doubt the probity of the deceased. Now, he might have done that a bit sooner, perhaps, but the court proceedings, they were to no avail. Thoresby recounts that he was in the poorest condition that I ever was, and he had other problems as well. He was helping his brother out, so he was £600 down in his brother's concern and £1,000 in Ibbotson's, of which he says he never got a farthing. Instead, he received perpetual demands from creditors and was even once arrested, and finding himself in the hands of the bailiff at the suit of a Mrs. F, who ordered his arrest without even demanding the debt. And he was forced to call for his sister-in-law, Mrs. Wilson, to stand bail for him. Thoresby, I mean, he was clearly upstanding, honest guy, and he said that, I mean, it reveals much about his character, some of the stuff in this court statement. I mean, he goes on to say that if he was aware of any outstanding debt due, he could not satisfy his conscience without payment, intimating that although his personal wealth was so far exhausted by the unfortunate partnership, he would nevertheless prefer to sell his library, medals and curiosities than leave a debt unsatisfied. And he only wished that such honest principles were present in the relations of his late partner, Mr. Ibbotson. I mean, even as late as 1701, Thoresby was reluctantly paying Hatfield an outstanding sum of £30, which seems to have been owing from the partnership. So Thoresby, he described the rapeseed venture as an unfortunate affair, embittering many years of his life. The court statement's an interesting and useful supplement to what we already know about the rapeseed business from the diary and the review. The time incurred supervising and directing the men was more than he bargained for, and deprived him of what he enjoyed the most, which was his antiquarian pursuits and, as he put it, the happy enjoyment of his papers. Although he did his best to improve the business, as well as my poor ability, time and capacity would permit, the partnership structure was nothing less than shambolic. He was naive, over-trusting, and even lazy in proceeding without the proper formalities in place, such as the partnership agreement, the cash book, and the accounts. And he suffered plenty of hardships, as he put it, from the Ibbotson family. But fortunately, his frugal character saw him through the crisis, or he might have been in danger, as he put it, of being utterly ruined altogether. And as for the Ibbotson family, well, they fared much better. James's son was created a baronet in 1748, and the family moved to a splendid country estate here at Denton Park, which still exists and was offices near Ilkley. Lovely, lovely looking house.
Denton.
Is it a hotel now? So, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so, there we go. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or observations. Yeah. Yeah.
Been roused during the past, arguments.
Yes, well, it's hard to tell, isn't it? But yeah, perhaps things didn't really come to a head until later on. I suspect they just bumbled along and things really came to a head afterwards, I suspect. I don't know. May well have been, but
It does look remarkable. He was a merchant's son. And if I remember
Yeah.
correctly, he was sent abroad at the young lad to learn the business.
Yeah. he should have been familiar with
They should have known about it.
because he took over his father's business when he was 21 or something, very, very young. So you'd have thought he would have had a bit of knowledge. I mean, they had, it's interesting, they each had their pocketbooks and everything went in there. So I suppose in theory, it could have been possible to draw, if they kept those accurately, it would have been possible to draw up something that looked like accounts that were realistic.
Do they still survive?
Not aware of them.
Did they actually produce any oil after all this?
Produce any? Oh,
Did they actually produce any oil after all this?
well, they must have done, because I mean they sort of they expanded, didn't they? By
They sold it so
well, all we know is Thoresby's brother Jeremiah and Ibbetson's brother-in-law, Mr. Fenton. Those are the only known buyers. But I think it was a profitable site. If they'd had a rapeseed oil mill there earlier in 1634, and they were still working there in a similar business, mustard oil, in early 1800s. There must have been something there worthwhile. Yeah.
observation really. Thank you for enlightening me. I had no idea that rapeseed oil was manufactured so early. When I was growing up, I don't remember seeing any yellow fields as you drove along. Maybe the last 30 years you see lots of them. And I was thinking it was more for, or knowing that the pollinators love it. So in terms of wildlife, it's good. But I had no idea. I've seen it on shelves for cooking as an alternative to olive oil or just mixed vegetables. So thank you for that at least.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I think they use it for the cattle feed as well.
Yes.
After it's been pressed.
Oh yes.
How many workers did they have in this written? I mean, you kept mentioning
The men.
the men.
Yeah.
and things. Well, how many is he employed? Or the two of them employed?
Yeah, we don't know that. That's not revealed.
Must have paid the wages though.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there was a problem too, because they were, as it were, co-religionists. Thoresby, I think, trusted Ibbotson because of his religion.
Yeah.
He says somewhere, this man should have been absolutely fine because of his deep religious feelings.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there was, that underlying a lot of the trust.
Yeah.
But then they were buying from Catholic Gascoigne.
Yeah.
They were
Wow.
no doubt there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting point. Yeah. Yes. Liz.
Rapeseed oil in cooking, aren't it?
Yeah.
It seems that, it wasn't for a long time. When does anybody know when it was first used and accepted that it's, it's an ordinary cooking oil? I think it's been growing for a long time. It's involved cattle feed and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than
Well,
you
it's old, is it 1300s?
Yeah. Peter, do you know?
Well, I don't know when it was first used as as an ingredient for, as an oil for cooking. But it's still widely used in industrial applications and the creation of soaps and so on, as we've heard. Those are its main applications now. The big areas where it's grown are Argentina and Ukraine, and market got quite disturbed, I think is what the proper word, by the invasion 3 years ago.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You've shown
Emma.
pictures of the beck.
Yes.
You actually walk along that as there are public ways through.
You can't get down there.
I mean, I wondered how you've taken the pictures.
Yes, I need to.
Oh. Yeah, you can. Well, you can look down on it.
Right, but you can't, it's not
Um,
public right.
No, I mean there's a pavement above. There's a pavement above. Yeah.
It was the intention of the council to open up the beck at that point. But then there was further discussion and they decided it might attract what was so desirable down there. And they decided they wouldn't change the mind.
I mean, I think there is a little video on YouTube of somebody exploring it.
Yeah.
And going all the way down to where it meets the River Aire, somewhere down by the armories.
Round
Yeah.
back burns.
Yeah,
You brought up on, just off Camp Road.
yeah,
And you said they always used to be over back
yeah,
and get told off because they would,
Yeah.
they're not supposed to go under the tunnels. They did.
yeah, yeah,
That was in the early 40s.
yeah, yeah.
And
Yes.
I just remember my eldest son had a job in Collinwood at the farm that used to have pick your own fruit. So if you're going through Collinwood on the right hand side, there's a farm. And that, when Paul worked there, aged about 16, so
Yeah.
about 20 years ago,
Yeah,
he had a job bottling rapeseed oil.
right.
Yeah, so and then they went into wood burners, that farm has done lots of different things, what they're now.
Yeah,
There's a brand called Yorkshire rapeseed oil.
Yeah.
I think it's from further north.
yeah, yeah. Right.